There's a small orange box sitting in almost every kitchen in America right now, and it's been quietly outperforming $40 fungicide sprays for over 100 years. My grandmother kept a coffee can of it by the back door, right next to her garden gloves, and she never once bought a bottle of chemical pest spray in her life. 2 spoons of it, mixed the right way, and she could stop a mildew outbreak before it ever took her tomatoes. Nobody told her to do this. Nobody sold it to her in a bright plastic bottle with a warning label 3 paragraphs long. She just knew. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what she knew. If you've ever grown anything, tomatoes, squash, roses, cucumbers, doesn't matter. You already know the feeling. You walk out one morning, coffee in hand, and there it is. A dusty gray-white film creeping across your squash leaves. A cluster of tiny green aphids huddled on the underside of a rosebud, sucking the life right out of it. Or worse, you come out to find your seedlings gnawed down to nothing overnight, with nothing but a silvery slime trail left behind to tell you a slug had a feast at your expense. Your first instinct is probably the same as everyone else's. You go to the garden center, and you stand in front of a wall of sprays and powders with names you can barely pronounce. You spend $20, $30, sometimes $50 on a bottle that promises to fix everything, and half the time, it barely touches the problem. Worse, a lot of those products are broad spectrum, meaning they don't just kill the pest, they kill the bees pollinating your squash blossoms and the ladybugs that would have eaten those aphids for free if you'd just left them alone. It's expensive. It's often toxic to the very insects your garden depends on. And a lot of it frankly doesn't work nearly as well as the folks selling it want you to believe. Your grandparents didn't have that wall of sprays. They had a pantry, and they made do. Not because they were desperate, but because what was in that pantry actually worked. Let's start with the big one, powdery mildew. If you've grown squash, zucchini, cucumbers, or roses, you've fought this battle. That dusty white coating isn't just ugly. It blocks sunlight from reaching the leaf, and if you don't stop it, it'll choke the plant's ability to feed itself. Here's the old-fashioned fix, and it costs you next to nothing. You'll need 1 gallon of water, 1 tablespoon of baking soda, 1 tablespoon of a light oil. Vegetable oil, canola, or horticultural oil all work, and a few drops of plain dish soap. Now here's why every ingredient matters, because a lot of folks skip a step and wonder why it didn't work. The baking soda raises the pH right on the surface of the leaf, and fungal spores can't survive in that kind of alkaline environment. But baking soda alone just beads up and rolls right off a waxy leaf. It needs something to help it cling on. That's what the oil and the dish soap are for. They act like glue, holding that baking soda solution against the leaf surface long enough to actually do its job. Mix it all together in a spray bottle, and spray your plants, top and bottom of the leaves, during the cool part of the day, either early morning or evening. Never spray in the hot afternoon sun, because the combination of oil and direct sunlight can actually scorch the leaves. Reapply every 7 to 14 days, and definitely reapply after a hard rain washes it off. Total cost? Maybe 15 cents a batch. Compare that to a bottle of commercial fungicide, and you start to understand why this recipe survived for generations without a marketing budget behind it. Here's something most people don't realize. That very same mixture you just made for mildew does double duty on aphids. Aphids are soft-bodied little insects, and they've got a thin, waxy coating protecting them, kind of like a raincoat. That baking soda and soap combination breaks down that protective layer on contact. The soap alone helps suffocate them, and the alkaline baking soda makes their situation even worse. The key word there is on contact. This spray isn't a poison that lingers and keeps killing for days. It has to physically touch the aphid to work. So get in close. Turn the leaves over, because aphids love to hide on the underside where it's shady and protected. Spray directly onto the clusters, not just a general mist over the top of the plant. Do this every few days for a week or two if you've got a bad infestation, and you'll watch those colonies collapse. And because this spray breaks down fast and doesn't leave a toxic residue behind, it's far gentler on the ladybugs, lacewings, and other beneficial insects that are your long-term defense against aphids anyway. Now let's talk about slugs, because these guys operate under cover of darkness, and by the time you see the damage, they're long gone hiding under a rock somewhere. This one's about as simple as it gets. Take dry baking soda, straight out of the box, and sprinkle a thin line of it around the base of your vulnerable plants. Lettuce, hostas, young seedlings, anything slugs love to shred overnight. Baking soda is highly absorbent and irritating to a slug's soft, moist body. They avoid crossing it the same way you'd avoid walking barefoot over hot gravel. It creates a temporary barrier they simply won't cross. Now, I want to be honest with you here. The way my grandmother always was. This isn't a permanent fix. Rain will dissolve that line, and you'll need to reapply it after every good soaking. But for pennies a season, refreshed every few days during a wet spell, it's remarkably effective at keeping the worst of the damage away, while your seedlings get strong enough to handle a nibble or two. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds like grandma's tale, passed down more out of habit than actual science. But here's the thing. Researchers at Cornell University have studied sodium bicarbonate's effect on fungal disease for decades, and their findings back up exactly what farmhouse kitchens figured out generations before any lab got involved. The alkaline environment baking soda creates genuinely does disrupt fungal spore development. This isn't a placebo. It's basic chemistry that folks were using long before anyone put a scientific label on it. And if you want to take it one step further, there's an even better option worth knowing about. Potassium bicarbonate. It works through that same mechanism against fungal disease, but instead of adding sodium to your soil over repeated use, it adds potassium, which your plants can actually use as a nutrient. Garden centers carry it, sometimes labeled for organic use, and if you're treating mildew regularly through the season, it's worth having on hand as a rotation with your baking soda spray. That's really the heart of why these old methods stuck around as long as they did. They weren't cutting corners. They were using what worked, what was already sitting in the kitchen, and what didn't come with a hazard label or a hefty price tag. Now, I'll give you the honest caveat, the same one any good gardener would give you before trying something new. Baking soda sprays aren't a miracle cure for every problem in every garden. Some plants are more sensitive than others, and heavy, repeated use can build up sodium in your soil over time. So test it on a small section of leaves first, wait a day, and make sure your plant doesn't react before you go spraying the whole row. Used properly, in moderation, it's one of the safest tools you'll ever put in a garden. Used carelessly, like anything, it can cause its own problems. That's the real philosophy behind all of this, isn't it? Keep it simple. Protect the bees and the ladybugs doing the real work in your garden. Avoid dumping unnecessary chemicals into soil you're going to grow food in. And trust the kind of wisdom that got passed down, not because it was trendy, but because it flat out worked, year after year, garden after garden. If any of these old tricks are new to you, you're not alone. Most of this knowledge quietly disappeared once garden centers convinced folks that fixing a plant problem meant buying something in a bottle. It didn't used to be that way, and it doesn't have to be that way in your garden either. I've put even more of these old-fashioned, tested methods together in my books, and if you want to go deeper, you can also join our growing community, where gardeners are trading these forgotten tricks with each other every week. Tell me down in the comments which one of these three you're trying first: the mildew spray, the aphid treatment, or the slug barrier. I read every single comment, and I love hearing how your garden's doing. And if you like this one, stick around, because next time we're digging into the old-timer secrets for keeping ants out of your kitchen for good. No traps, no poison, just what actually worked before any of us were born. Subscribe if you want more of these forgotten household secrets, because the old ways aren't gone. They're just waiting for somebody to remember them. Your grandmother's coffee can was never just baking soda. It was a whole garden's worth of secrets, sitting quietly by the back door the entire time.